In this video, I'm going to tell you a story that still leaves me speechless. My name is Elena, and I'm the mother of two twin boys, Gabriel and Samuel, who were born completely deaf. For 5 years, I lived in a world where silence was the rule. I learned to be a mother without sound, to love without ever hearing mommy, and to sing even without knowing if they would ever listen. But everything changed on an ordinary Sunday when we stopped in front of an old statue of the Virgin Mary. Something happened there. Something that no one, not the doctors, not even I, could explain. Days later, my children began reacting to sounds, and a little while after that, they called me Mommy for the first time. If you believe that miracles still happen, stay with me until the end of this video. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next testimonies, and leave your like. It really helps spread stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? I'd love to know how far this message is reaching. May this story speak to your heart. I never thought I would tell this story. For a long time, I thought that if I spoke it out loud, all of it would lose its meaning, or that perhaps I myself would start to doubt what I had lived through. My name is Elena. I'm a nurse and the mother of twin boys, Gabriel and Samuel. They were born completely deaf. When the doctors gave me the diagnosis, I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. But life didn't give me time to fall. In time, I learned to accept. I learned to communicate with them, to love them in the silence, to sing even knowing they couldn't hear. The routine was tiring, but it was ours. I never expected miracles. I just wanted my children to be happy, even in their silent world. However, everything changed on a Sunday in March. We had just left my grandmother's house, as we did almost every weekend, when I decided to take a different route home. I don't even know why. I just wanted to see another street, to break the routine. That's when we passed an old church, one of those very traditional ones with a dark stone facade and a statue of the Virgin Mary in the front garden. As we drove past, the two of them started hitting the car window, pointing outside. They were agitated, but I couldn't understand why. It was only when I stopped the car and watched them both get out and run straight to the statue that I realized there was something there, something I couldn't explain. I got out of the car, running after them, not understanding anything. The two were fixed on the statue, standing still as if they had been pulled by something unseen. The image of the Virgin Mary was made of light stone, already somewhat worn by time, with a dark blue mantle covering her shoulders and her hands extended forward. I saw it as just another old image, but my son's eyes, they looked as if they had found something alive. I stood behind them, quietly, without interrupting. They stretched out their little arms and placed their hands on the base of the statue, side by side. And they stayed there. They didn't speak, they didn't move, they just began to cry. But it wasn't a desperate cry. It was a calm cry, as if they had understood something I didn't. I slowly knelt down, touched their backs, but I didn't have the courage to ask anything. Something about that moment demanded silence. After a few minutes, they released the statue and turned to me, their faces still wet, but smiling. It was a different kind of smile. I know every expression of those boys. I know when they're scared, when they're confused, when they want attention. But that smile, it was a kind of peace I had never seen in their eyes. "Can we go home now?" Gabriel signed to me with his hands, as if nothing had happened. On the way back, they were quiet. They didn't play, they didn't gesture to each other, they just looked out the window. I drove in silence too, with a knot in my chest. It felt like I was trying to lock it all away in a little box inside my head, afraid that if I tried to understand or ask too much, everything would fall apart like a dream. That night, after I bathed them and put on their pajamas, I tried to better understand what had happened. I sat on the bed, pulled them close, and asked, using signs, "What did you feel today at the church?" The two looked at each other for a few seconds, as if they were trying to decide whether they should tell me something. But in the end, they just smiled and lay down. Samuel hugged me and closed his eyes, as if that was enough. It moved me. I didn't know if it had just been a coincidence, if it was something in their heads, or mine. But something inside me had changed. And it wasn't fear, it wasn't worry. It was something closer to a hunch. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I felt that moment in front of the statue had not been by chance. 3 days later, I was washing the dinner dishes when I dropped a pot on the floor. It was a dry, loud, metallic sound. And then I looked up and froze. Gabriel and Samuel were there, in the kitchen doorway, looking directly at the spot on the floor where the pot had hit. They had heard. They had heard. In that moment, I froze, my hands wet, my heart racing. I could only stare at the two of them, unable to move. It's not possible, I thought. I rushed over to them, knelt down on the floor, and asked with my hands, "Did you hear that?" Neither of them answered, but they looked at me with a serious, almost frightened expression, as if they didn't know what was happening either. That night, after they fell asleep, I went to the bathroom and cried like I hadn't cried since my husband's funeral. And for the first time, I prayed for real. Not that automatic prayer of someone who just wants the day to end, but a sincere, broken, desperate prayer, the kind that comes from the depths of the soul. If this is real, please don't let it stop. The following week, I was called for a routine meeting at the school they attended. It was one of those normal conversations with the teacher in charge, just to track their development. But that morning, when I entered the pedagogue's room, I felt it wouldn't be an ordinary conversation. The teacher greeted me with a contained smile, pulled up a chair, and before even saying anything, gave me a different look. "Elena, I've noticed something strange in the last few days. The boys are different." My body froze. "Different? How?" I asked, my voice slightly shaky. She took a deep breath and said, "Yesterday, during class, one of the students dropped a pile of books on the floor. It made a loud noise, and the two of them, Gabriel and Samuel, turned instantly, both of them, at the same time." I couldn't say anything. I just stared at her for a few seconds, trying to find some logical justification. There wasn't one. She completed her thought. "They have never reacted like that. Never. And I've been working with deaf children for over 20 years. This is not common. It's as if something has awakened." The same day, I made an appointment with their pediatrician, Dr. Roberto. He has been monitoring the boys since they were born, knows every exam, every history, every attempt at adaptation. I entered the office with the two of them beside me, and even before the clinical part, I was already trembling inside. Dr. Roberto performed the usual tests, first with calm eyes, then with a furrowed brow. He repeated the exams 2, 3 times. With each repetition, his silence grew, until he took off his glasses, rubbed his face, and said, "Elena, there is some auditory response here. It's minimal, but it's here." I started crying right there. The room was spinning. I didn't know if it was joy, fear, or pure confusion. "But this is not possible," he continued. "There's no medical explanation, none. Their type of deafness is irreversible." And it was there, in that padded chair, smelling of alcohol and tissue paper on the examining table, that I felt for the first time that something greater was behind it all. Something that went far beyond medicine. When I arrived home after the appointment, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water trembling in my hands. The boys were in the bedroom, playing with their colored blocks as if nothing had happened. But I could no longer pretend it was just a coincidence. For 5 years, I heard specialists tell me there was no hope. I learned to accept, to build an entire world based on silence. And now they were reacting to sounds. I remembered clearly the day at the church, the way they touched the statue, the tears that flowed without explanation. That scene kept replaying in my head like a repeated film. I didn't know if it was a miracle, a sign, or if I was going crazy. But for the first time in a long time, I let the doubt make room for something I had buried years ago: hope. In the following days, I started noticing small details. Samuel turned his face when he heard the neighbor's dog bark. Gabriel stopped drawing when the intercom rang. And every time this happened, I felt like my heart stopped for a second. But the most striking moment came on an ordinary Saturday morning. I was singing softly, stirring eggs in the frying pan, distracted, when I felt a touch on my arm. It was Samuel. He was standing there, looking at me. And then, for the first time in his life, he tried to make a sound. It wasn't an exact word. It didn't come out as expected. But it was a sound coming from him, not a scream. A sound of someone trying to speak. Right then, I dropped the spatula, knelt down on the kitchen floor, and started to cry. I cried like a child. Because in that instant, I knew he had heard me. He was trying to answer me. I yelled for Gabriel. I don't know why, it was instinct. And he came running from the living room, startled. But what made me break down was the fact that he came because he heard. He walked into the kitchen, saw the scene, me kneeling, his brother standing beside me, and stood there, staring at me. I lowered my head and hugged them both at the same time. My chest ached from feeling so much. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, whether to give thanks or ask what was happening. But one thing was certain: it was no longer just an impression. It was real. They were hearing, still with limitations, still timidly, but they were. And inside me, it was so glaring, so absurd, that I could only think of returning to the place where it all began. The church. 3 months after that first Sunday, we went back there. The same route, the same curve, the old facade with the stones stained by time, and the image of the Virgin Mary, motionless in the garden, just as before. It was cold, but the sky was clear. The boys were quieter than usual during the drive. When we got out of the car, they didn't run like the first time. They walked slowly, one on each side, holding my hands. That silence seemed full of meaning. When we got close to the statue, I knelt down with them and let them place their hands once more on the cold stone. And it was there, in that simple, unspectacular moment, that I heard something I will never forget. The two of them, almost whispering, said together, "Thank you." The voices were shaky, drawn out, small, but they were voices. My sons were talking. My sons, who had never heard a lullaby, were giving thanks with words they had never uttered. That completely broke me. I could never look at that image of the Virgin Mary the same way again. It wasn't just a statue anymore. It was as if that place had kept a secret that was only revealed at that moment. We stood there for a few minutes, not saying anything else. I felt a knot in my throat and at the same time a strange peace. A silent certainty that something much bigger than I could understand had happened. There was no background music, no shining light, no sky opening. It was just a mother kneeling with her children in front of a stone image. But in that silence full of meaning, I understood everything. I thanked in my mind, softly. I didn't ask for anything. I just thanked. Because it was impossible to live through that and remain the same. When we returned to the car, the boys were serene. They didn't ask anything, didn't comment on anything. It was as if they knew there was nothing left to say. In the weeks that followed, we started the process with the speech therapist. It was tiring. They had a 5-year delay in oral language. Every new word was a battle. Every sound was a conquest. But the difference was that, this time, there was a flame lit in them. A willfulness I had never seen before. And in me, too. I was no longer the mother who did everything not to feed hope. I believed, not because someone told me, but because I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears, and no exam, no medical report, no rational explanation could take that away from me. The doctor even wrote spontaneous auditory recovery in the report. But I knew it wasn't just that. I saw where it all began. And to this day, when people ask me what happened, all I can say is, It happened. Just like that. It happened. And to this day, I can't explain it. There was one night in particular that is etched in my memory. We were already in the middle of speech therapy, and the boys had learned to say some basic words. Water. Mommy. No. More. But that night, they asked to sleep with me in bed. The two of them, together, like they did when they were very small. I accepted, of course. I made up the bed properly, adjusted the pillows, and turned off the bedroom light. I only left the hallway light on, with the door slightly ajar, as they like it. I lay down between the two of them, all three covered up to the neck, and we were silent. After a few minutes, Gabriel nudged me. I looked at him in the dark, and he said softly, with that still drawn-out voice, "Sing, Mommy." My heart stopped. I had sung so many times before, even knowing they couldn't hear. But now it was different. He was asking to hear, and I sang. I sang softly, afraid that the emotion would make my voice fail. I sang a simple lullaby that I had used since they were babies, and, for the first time, I felt that the words were reaching where they had never reached before. Samuel smiled with his eyes closed. Gabriel moved his lips, trying to follow along, even without knowing the lyrics properly. And I cried. I cried in silence, my head on the pillow and my throat tight. That simple scene, the two of them with their eyes closed, smiling and trying to sing, was more than any diagnosis, more than any report. It was proof that something I never expected had happened. And it was there, in that bed, in the middle of the night, that I understood. Sometimes the miracle doesn't come with trumpets or light from the sky. It comes in a whispered request from a child who just wants to hear his mother's voice for the first time. After that night, everything gained a new rhythm. The speech therapy sessions became the highlight of the week. Every new word was celebrated as if it were a goal in a World Cup final. Ball, daddy in heaven, more milk, bye. Sometimes they spoke incorrectly, jumbled, confused. But they spoke. And the sound of their voices was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life. The school teacher called me again after a month. She greeted me at the classroom door with an emotional hug. She said that the two of them were trying to repeat what their classmates were saying, even if they were a little shy. They were more attentive, more participatory. It was as if the world had opened a crack for them to enter, and they were crossing through with courage. And I, who had learned to live without expecting anything, was now surprised by everything, by every sound, every reaction, every audible laugh. But what surprised me most was the way the two of them seemed to understand that something different had happened. They never asked me, "Why now?" They never demanded an explanation. It was as if, inside them, it made sense. And that gave me a strange peace. Sometimes, when we were driving home from school, they would ask, "Drive past the statue, Mommy." And I would. I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't get out. I would just drive slowly, with the windows open. They would look out the window with a calmness I can't explain. They wouldn't say anything. They just looked. I wouldn't say a word either. But inside, I always gave thanks. Always. Even without understanding, even without being able to explain. Gratitude became a habit, like brushing my teeth or making the bed. Because once in my life, I saw something impossible happen. And when that happens, you learn to live a different way. The hardest part was when I tried to tell this story to other people. Some believed right away. They were emotional. They said it was a miracle, that God had done something great. Others did not. Some people said it was a coincidence, that maybe the initial exams were wrong, that young children are still developing and can surprise you. I don't argue. I just listen and nod my head. Because for me, it doesn't matter to convince anyone. I saw it. I was there. I felt every second of it. And honestly, even if no one else believed it, it wouldn't change what happened. I saw my sons touch a statue, cry in silence, and days later start to hear. I saw it with my own eyes, and that's what I carry with me. That's what sustains me when the world tries to push logic as the only possible truth. The most curious thing is that after a while, everything simply stopped evolving in the same way. They continued hearing, but it didn't progress much beyond that, as if there was a limit. They hear the basics, understand the essentials, but they don't have perfect hearing. And even so, that never frustrated me, because what we received was an unexpected gift, a gift that came out of nowhere and that I never had the courage to ask for. And that is exactly what moves me the most to this day. It wasn't something I begged for, something I pleaded for in desperation. No. It happened when I had already accepted, when I had already made peace with reality, when everything was already adjusted for a life in silence. And perhaps that is why it marked me so much, because it was free. It was a gesture of love that I will never be able to repay. I can only tell the story and be grateful. Sometimes I catch myself looking at them and remembering how it all began. The way they ran to that statue without saying anything, as if they were guided by something invisible. That never happened again. They never ran like that again. They never cried like that again. And I keep thinking, was it just one time? Did it need to happen just once to fulfill what it had to fulfill? I've gone back to that church 3 or 4 more times alone. I sit in the back pew, look at the image, stay silent. And the same feeling always comes to me, as if something has closed, as if that moment was unique, and then it was over. It's not that the faith ended, but that manifestation, that inexplicable force, it was like a breath. It came and went. There are days when I still try to understand why. Why us? Why that way? Why without warning, without explanation? But then I remember how they lived before. That house where everything was visual, where sound didn't exist. And today I see them calling me, hearing me, trying to talk. And that is enough. The truth is that I don't have the answers, and maybe I never will. That didn't transform me into an enlightened person, nor did it give me powers, nor absolute answers about faith. It just showed me that there are things that are completely beyond our control, and that when they happen, we don't need to understand, just to live, just to be thankful, and to cherish. Because these things don't come back in the same way. They happen. They mark you. And then they become a part of who we are. There were many nights when I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it all meant. I never had a vision. I never heard a divine voice telling me what to do, and I didn't see bright lights in the sky. But inside me, I knew it had come from God. And even so, I can't explain how. I can't put into words what happened. It was real. It was concrete. It had witnesses. A doctor said it was impossible. But at the same time, it was invisible. No one will ever see this miracle the way I saw it. Only I carry the burden, or perhaps the privilege, of having lived this with such clarity. And that is enough for me. I don't need to prove it to anyone. I don't have a photo, video, or exam that translates what my eyes saw in that garden, on that cold Sunday morning. I only have the memory, and that memory has become a part of my faith. Today, Gabriel and Samuel are 7 years old. They are in a regular school, still doing speech therapy, but they live a life very close to that of any other child their age. And I continue to be the mother who sings before bed. But now, they sing along. Sometimes they're off-key, they get the lyrics wrong, but they sing. And every time I hear their voices, I still get that knot in my throat. It hasn't become routine. It never will. Because inside me, that sound carries the weight of a miracle that arrived unasked for. That touched 2 children who had never heard anything, and that disappeared the same way it came, in silence, Nothing extraordinary ever happened again. They never cried touching a statue again. They never reacted like that day again. But once it happened, and that alone changed everything. I decided to write this today because it's been 2 years since that day. And even with time passing, I still don't have a logical explanation. No new study has emerged. No alternative diagnosis has appeared. No one has given me a satisfactory answer. And that's okay. Because some things may not have been meant to be explained. They were meant to happen, to transform, and to remain as a living memory within us. And even though today the routine is different, even though life has gone back to being busy, with commitments, bills, chores, and the younger brother's diapers, I still go back to that Sunday every time I hear a whispered "Mommy" in the middle of the night. Every time they ask me to sing again. Every time someone says that miracles don't happen anymore. I am no better than anyone else. I am not holier nor more deserving. But I lived through something that completely changed the way I see the world. Something that began with silence and ended with sound. Something that arrived without warning, shook everything up, and then simply stopped, as if it had only come to say, "You are not alone." And I have never felt alone since then. This is my story, and even if you don't believe it, even if you think it's an exaggeration or a coincidence, that's okay. But if you are also living through something that seems impossible, if you have already given up asking, praying, hoping, keep this story with you. Because what happened to me and my children was not planned nor predicted. It just happened, and that was more than enough. If this story has touched your heart, as it touched mine, I want to tell you one thing. Miracles still happen. Sometimes they don't come with noise or with explanations, but they come. And when they come, they change everything. What I lived through with my children taught me that hope can be reborn even when we have already given up. That God can act in silence, and that a simple prayer can open doors that science does not understand. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever lived through something that no one could explain? A moment when you felt that God was present? Tell me in the comments. Share your experience. Because every testimony can renew the faith of someone who is about to give up. If you believe that stories like this need to be told, subscribe to the channel now and turn on the notification bell. This is what ensures you don't miss the next videos, which also have the power to transform lives. If you want to support this project and don't know how, you can become a channel member by clicking the Join button below. It's simple, secure, and makes all the difference so that we can continue to spread messages of faith and hope. And don't leave the video yet. Click on the recommended content that will appear on the screen. It's another powerful testimony that might be exactly what you need to hear today. May God bless you, and may the Virgin Mary continue to protect you. Until the next video.